Today's lesson will be on location and landscapes, how to take good landscape photos in different locations. So for me, this is my favorite subject to take photos of because I'm an adventurer. I love going out for a hike or just when I visit a new town or visit a nature reserve, something similar. I love to take photos of that environment. So I'm sure if you've traveled to a beautiful location, it'll be natural that you want to capture those sites on your smartphone as a store of memory or perhaps share with your loved ones on social media. So to capture landscapes, we will look at some techniques on shooting quality and memorable images. So think of the photos you see on travel guides, the images that draw you to that hotel, to that resort. There's a reason why they resonate and why you end up booking that venue. Techniques that we'll explore are symmetry, composition, leading lines, textures, and exposure. Also, I suggest that you take inspiration from films and other photographers. So in today's lesson, we will look at landscape photos and just dissect how to compose to get that perfect shot. So I went to a cricket match just in the city. I was able to take some photos with the city on the background using the cricket players as the foreground. So this was an interesting subject because I wanted to get a wide view of the city center, and we will look at how to compose. So let us look at this image. When I composed this image, I wanted to juxtapose the two. That is the cricket match on the foreground and the skyscrapers on the background. So you can tell there's an activity that's happening on the foreground. The cricket players are running around, but then there's a stillness or calmness on the background. There's no movement that we can see or perceive in the background. It's just tall buildings of different sizes and of different colors. So this photo was shot during the midday. The sun was blazingly hot, but you can see the outlines of the trees, the divide between the cricket field and the buildings in the city center. So for me, I found that to be a compelling story, that in the silence of the city on the background, we see a hyperactivity in the foreground. So let us look at this particular image. The subject is placed on the last third. So remember the rule of thirds. The subject is placed on my right, and which is the last third. So that makes for an interesting composition style. And one fascinating or interesting thing to observe is that the subject is walking on a path, and we can clearly see the path. So the path represents what I call a leading line. So there is a line that leads to where the subject is, and we can see from the image that the subject is on a path to somewhere. So that adds a dynamic to the story. We can clearly tell a narrative of what's happening in front of us. One other thing is to observe what is on the background. And this in this image is mountains, and we can tell some patterns. There is a pattern that we can observe, patterns of the mountain, the grooves of the mountains. So those are things to consider when you capture an image with your phone. What do you see beyond the subject? Where do you place your subject? And how can your subject stand out? So that what makes a rich composition when taking a photo. So I'd like to encourage you to do this assignment. So on your next visit to the park or a nature reserve, try to take a photo of the landscape. Make it a wide angle shot so you can include everything, the details of the trees, the rocks, or whatever that you see. Try to tell a story with the elements that are in front of your camera. This will help you master composition, because if you have a story to tell in that landscape, you'll be able to place this subject in order to tell and communicate your story effectively. Should be fun. I can't wait for you to share those photos. There'll be details on what hashtag to use so we can look at each other's photos. Thank you for joining me in this lesson. So I encourage you to go out and shoot as many images as possible. Try to play around with whatever subject that you use. Juxtapose them with the environment that they are in. Also, try to apply things like leading lines. What are the textures that you see? Include those. What is on the background? What is on the foreground? Play around with those in order to make your photo rich in detail. In our next lesson, we will look into food and products.